So we're back out here in my favorite little spot, and I thought I'd do a little garden confessions video. And so today I was going to talk about I don't say my dislike, but the fact that I never have any intention of planting a Japanese maple here. And with all the garden tours that I go on and all the places that we go and all the gardeners that I meet, it seems like that plant, that tree, shrub, is so popular with so many people, and it doesn't seem like you can almost design a garden without it. That, or just stop, that everybody has. I mean, at least one. I've seen gardens that were completely designed around Japanese maples, like 9, 10 or more, and not because they were Japanese inspired gardens, but just because people loved them and wanted to incorporate them. And it's not. I can't say not gonna say I dislike them. I think they're beautiful in other people's gardens, and so I was trying to like unpack that. Like, what is it that I feel about this plant? And there are a couple like there's a moon series like full moon and amber moon and whatever, and I think the foliage is beautiful. But they just don't belong here. And part of that, I think, is when we first moved here and I first started putting the garden together. They're the kind of plant that needs part sun, part shade, and they don't really love like an exposed location with lots of wind. And seriously, this was a barren landscape with no no windbreak, no shade. Like, to have that plant, I would have really had to work hard to find a place to put it. And I know people who struggle having them in their gardens because of their exposure, and or grow them in fancy pots and then overwinter them inside their sheds or garages. I mean, you really got to love a plant to do that. Mm. But I guess why I feel a little, I don't say embarrassed, but a little, I guess, fear of missing out, maybe. I don't know. It's a complicated emotion, but because not not every plant is for everyone. But that plant just like seems to be for everyone but me. Like, everybody else loves that. And you, like I said, you just see so many gardens and they're highlighted and people ooh and ah over them. And so I guess the second part of this garden and Japanese maples is not just the fact that in the beginning they would have been unhappy here. I'm sure now I could find a spot for them after all this time. There's plenty of shadier spots and more sheltered areas. But this is a true garden. Somebody actually called this garden the other day chaos, which is, I mean, it's appropriate. I don't think she meant it in a negative way, and I didn't take it in a negative way, but it's definitely a cottage garden. Everything's planted all together. My fruit trees and and blueberry bushes and raspberries, all just incorporated right into the garden. Uh, and so no part of it feels formal. No part of it feels uh, like a Japanese maple belongs. And I don't even know what that means, but it just doesn't feel right to me. It feels like a modern plant. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. My garden is extremely, I didn't want to say old fashioned. You're looking at a girl who loves ditch lilies. Like, I love a ditch lily. I love the orange. I love everything about it. I have them planted here. My grandmother gave me some. And I love, all kinds of iris and any kind of cottage garden plant, hollyhock, mallow, uh, just that vibe of everything all stuffed in and stuff seeding everywhere and coming up where you don't expect them, and plants growing over the edges of the walkways. Like, that's my vibe. That's what I like. And I just don't feel like a Japanese maple fits that vibe. And then I was just trying to think more about where my real feelings for them came from. And when I first started gardening with the master gardeners, and this was a long, long, long time ago. And we were working at Elm Bank in Wellesley, Mass, which was it is now the base of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society. And as such, they had different gardens that were designed by, premier garden designers, and they all had their name associated with those gardens. So there's like an Adrian Bloom garden, and I forget the woman who designed their children's garden, but featured very prominently. Their name was associated with the garden on signage, um, and at that time, those gardens were in terrible, terrible shape. Like, I mean, embarrassing shape for a horticultural society. Uh, and long story long, Adrian Bloom's garden ended up, we had to auger in compost in, rather than pulling up all the plants, we augered in compost and filled all little holes to improve the health of those plants. And the children's garden, we spent, I don't know, the better part of a month pulling out bamboo. Like, it was crazy. But on one of my first assignments, when we went to Mass Hort, we walked into one of the gardens, and I can't remember which, and there were these two Japanese maples, and they looked awful. and and I remember people gushing about how expensive of trees they were, and just in general how everybody was treating them with kid gloves, and saying, don't ruin the Japanese maples, they're the highlight of this garden. And then that was my assignment. Somebody handed me that assignment. They said, your job today is to prune those two Japanese maples. And I don't know who thought I was qualified for that, or um, and I I might have said, like, I don't think I can do that. And they said, oh, just like do your best. Like, you'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I'm sure it was in the end, because nobody complained, and I did, what I had been sort of trained to do, and I think they came out fine. But I guess I have a negative sort of association with them because of that too. I don't know. So it's just like a plant that's just never going to be here in this garden. And when I see them in other people's gardens, and I hear people talking about them, and often when I'm watching YouTube videos, or garden tours all over the place, they seem to be like a highlight, and everybody seems to love them. And I'm trying to share in that emotion and that feeling, because I feel sort of like left out. But you know, not every plant, I guess, belongs here, or belongs in everybody's garden space, or and so that's one that's just not going to be planted here. So I guess I can feel bad about it. And I wonder if people think, like, sometimes too, that this garden is unsophisticated, that it's sort of like a granny garden. But you know what? There's something for everybody. So I hope you guys like seeing some of the videos, and I wonder if anybody else has a plant that they know everybody else loves, that they see in all kinds of gardens, and they just would never have in theirs because they don't like it for one reason or another. Um, Maybe I'm just alone in that. Who knows? All right. Well, I hope you're enjoying whatever you're doing in your garden today, and we'll talk soon.